Wow, guys, look at that. That is like a perfect dressing recipe. I think there's only one way that that dressing could be any more perfect. It's beautiful and moist, but you know, anybody knows that dressing is best with a little giblet gravy. Hey guys, welcome back to Texas Cooking Today. On this episode, we're going to be making some cornbread dressing. Some people call this stuffing, but that's only when you put it inside the bird, guys, okay? Now, we have a wonderful dish. I have all of these fabulous ingredients here, and we're going to make some true American heritage food. Dressing, something that went with the turkey. Oh man, we use the flavors of the turkey, but the thing about dressing is regional. Every place you go in the United States, you're going to get a little bit different tweak here and there. Some places where oysters are abundant, you'll find a lot of the people that live there will have oysters in their dressing. Other places, well, if you go to New Orleans, you're going to find probably some andouille sausage in that dressing. If you come to Texas, you'll probably find some pecans in your dressing. So I'll tell you what, every place is, like I said, a little bit regional. All of these fabulous recipes, and the recipe I have comes from Grandpa Trotter. The old man knew how to cook, let me tell you. And I've got a recipe here. This sucker's over 100 years old, and it's delicious, okay? So you've got to try this out. Come over this way. Let's go over these fantastic ingredients we have, and let's make some of the best tasting dressing that you're ever going to put in your mouth. Come on over. Let's go over these fantastic ingredients, and I'm going to start right back here. This is the turkey that I've just finished cooking up. It has been resting now. I have these fabulous drippings in the pan underneath it. Those drippings are an integral part of making a really good quality dressing, so I'm going to be using some of that. In this pan, I have the giblets that came from the turkey as well as the neck, and I cooked it up in this. So I have a beautiful broth in here, and I have these giblets I'm going to make gravy with. But the neck, I took it and shredded it out for neck meat. And we're going to put this neck meat in this dressing, and it makes it absolutely fantastic tasting. I have one recipe of cornbread here, and one recipe of biscuits. And if you notice, I didn't do a pretty job of cutting these or trying to get them nice and thick or anything. No. These are strictly for their structure and their flavor in the same way as this. You want to use a cornbread that is not sweet. No sugar in the cornbread, okay? If it's a sweet cornbread, well, your dressing probably won't come out very good. I have also some eggs here. These are hard-boiled eggs. I'm not using all of this. I'm going to take these eggs, we're going to dice them up. I'll use approximately 1 cup of those 5 eggs for the dressing. And then the rest of it I'm going to use as an additive for my giblet gravy that I'm going to be making. Here I have some sage. I'll be cutting up an onion. When I'm finished, I'm going to want roughly 1 cup to 1 1/4 cup of diced onion. And the same way with this celery, about 1 to 1 1/4 cup of fine diced celery. I have, of course, the neck meat here. I'll chop that up just a little bit more. And back here I have 1 cup of chopped pecans, and this is a 1/2 cup of butter. This is just a fantastic recipe, folks. The flavors that come out of this are sparkling, delicious, and absolutely unbelievable. And if you're looking for a fantastic recipe, you found the right one. Now let's get on to processing this. We're going to make some absolutely delicious right now. In order to make a really good dressing, you have to have a couple of items. first item that you have to have is going to be some cornbread. And the second item that you're going to absolutely have to have is going to be either bread or crackers or biscuits or something. So what we're doing, according to Granddad's recipe here, we're going to be making some biscuits and we're going to make a cornbread. And that's what I have the ingredients out for here. Now, I'm going to start on this side first. What we're dealing with here is cornbread. So I have 1 cup of yellow cornmeal, 3/4 of a cup of flour, 4 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 eggs, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I know that's a lot more right there. I'm just going to pull it out at the time. And 6 ounces or 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk. So that will be our cornbread recipe, and this is really easy to make. We're just going to combine the dry ingredients and then mix in the wet stuff and put it in the pan and cook it. Now that'll cook at 425. It usually takes about 20-25 minutes, in that neighborhood. It depends on altitude and other stuff, and you know that from your own area. The other recipe we're going to be doing is a simple rolled biscuit. Very good flavor, and it makes a superb dressing. Now this is a really, really neat way to do this. We have 1 cup of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and that's a double-acting baking powder in both cases on both recipes. I have here 3 ounces of buttermilk and 4 tablespoons of cold butter. I'll be using again a 1/2 teaspoon of salt in this recipe as well. All I need to do here is combine these by cutting the butter into the flour after I mix in the baking powder, and then we will slowly work in the wet ingredients and fix up our biscuits and roll them out. First thing I'm going to do before biscuits, we're going to start with the cornbread. That usually takes a little longer to cook. Then we'll get the biscuits ready and get them cooking as well. Set your oven at 425 degrees and let's get at it. I do need to mention that when it comes to cornbread recipes, you do not want to use a store recipe that has any form of sugar in it. A sweet cornbread does not work when it comes to making dressing. The sweet cornbreads will throw the flavor seriously, and basically it'll ruin your product. Don't do that. You want an unsweetened cornbread. Remember, this isn't a cornbread that we're making to eat just as cornbread. This is a cornbread we're making to bake something else with. I'm going to combine, as I mentioned before, all of my dry ingredients. Shake that in there. There we go. My 1/2 teaspoon of salt, right there. After I get those dry ingredients in that bowl, just give them a good spin. There we go. Got everything in there combined. Now I need to take care of the eggs and the milk. Let's start by cracking those eggs into a bowl. There we are. Let's break those yolks and beat them. We don't have to go crazy with it. We just want to get these well combined. There's our mixture. And here's where it gets easy. Let's just combine the two. Now, if you notice how I've done this, I did it in such a way to produce a nice product without it lumping up. Everything getting combined quickly and easily. I need to cook this in a single pan. You can use a cake pan, a casserole dish. I'm using a casserole dish this time. I'm going to put a little bit of oil in there. That was just some cooking oil. I'm going to gently paint it around, pulling it up on the sides a little bit. Now, if you wanted to use butter or shortening for this, you can do that also. We just want something in there to keep that from sticking. And remember, this isn't cornbread, like I said, for the purpose of making something to eat just by itself. When you make a cornbread like this, it's for the sole purpose of baking something else with it. And there's our cornbread, almost ready to hit the oven. All I'm trying to do now is to get it leveled out and even in my pan. So that cornbread hits the oven. It's 425. We're going to give it plenty of time to rise up and turn a little golden brown on top. If it splits open a little bit, that doesn't matter. And if it overcooks slightly and gets a bit dry, that's only a good thing. So we're looking for browning here and a dry condition. It's time for us to make our biscuits. Let's get everything mixed together. When it comes to making biscuits, it's a little bit different than the cornbread we just did. What I have to do is to turn this into little pieces that mix into that real well, and that's called cutting in. But before I can cut that in, I first kind of need to mix my baking powder in with my flour. So I'm going to get my flour in my bowl, my baking powder on top, and a pinch of salt. This recipe requires 1/2 teaspoon of salt. That's it. This is called a pastry blender. Of course, you know a whisk. Now, why the pastry blender? Pastry blenders are really, really cool. It's a simple tool, it's cost efficient, and it allows you to cut butter or other fats into dry ingredients such as flour. That's pretty much the whole idea of it. So that's what I'm going to do. Now what's going to happen, like you see here, your butter will get caught up on the pastry blender. And what needs to be said here, when it comes to doing this, the colder the butter, the better. You don't want warm butter. Do not cut warm butter into flour. You will end up with a mess. If you're doing this with another type of fat, let's say lard or shortening, both of them work. You'll want those to be a bit cold also. When it comes to making really flaky biscuits, if we were going to make these for the purpose of just sitting down and eating some fine biscuits, well, I wouldn't be using this butter, I'd be using lard. It gives it a better flavor and it comes out way flakier. Now, I've got this mixture with these little crumbs of butter in it, and they're knocked down to about pea size or just slightly larger. Perfect. I want to work in my buttermilk. You can use the pastry blender for this. I'm not doing it all at once, just a little bit. And all I'm doing is getting enough buttermilk in this to get it to kind of stick together. If you were making biscuits for the table, then you're going to want as dry a dough as possible, and it makes it flakier. But also, making sure those fats do not melt while you're doing this is real important. Now the last of my buttermilk. See how it's all coming together now? There we go. I'm going to get my pastry blender out of my way. A little flour on my hands and on my board. If you're using a color-coded cutting board system like I use, that white board is specifically for dairy and bakery. So what I'm doing now is what this white board was actually intended for. If I was wanting perfect biscuits, what I would be doing right now is I would roll this out like so. I'd fold it into thirds. I'd roll it out again like so. Fold it into thirds. Isn't this an interesting little trick? Roll it out again. And what this does, it helps to ensure that you get a really layered, flaky type of biscuit. Although, I have to admit, for this recipe, it is not so important. But I thought it would just be nice to show you that. For this recipe, I'm not looking for a bunch of big honking biscuits. All I need are just a few to crumble. So what they look like doesn't matter. So instead of cutting nice little round biscuits, I'm not going to bother with that. We're just going to cut out these little squares and we're going to bake them up. Now the oven's already at 425 for our cornbread. I'll place these over here on my pan. And if you get dark brown corners on this, hey, perfect. After all, every time that we brown something, that browning is flavor and it's extra texture and it's wonderful in something like dressing. All I have to do now is get this down in my oven, get it cooking. Here we go. As my items are cooking in the oven, I need to go ahead and cook up my giblets. So I'm going to put all of that right in there. I'm going to add just a little bit of salt. It's about a half a teaspoon, maybe 3/4, somewhere in there. A couple cups of water. If I need to add a little more water, that'll be fine. I can do that. This is a simple preparation. All I have to do is cover this and gently simmer it until the neck meat is falling off of the bone. When I reach that point, then everything is ready. Now guys, let's go ahead and get everything sliced up here. I have separated some of my celery, and I did this for the sole purpose that, you know, I knew I was not going to be wanting those leaves in my dressing, but I do want them as a garnish, so I went ahead and cut the tops off of these and cut off a few of these stalks because I certainly didn't need a whole head of celery. If you'll notice what I'm doing here, we're making some lengthwise cuts. I don't want full width pieces. I want some smaller size pieces. There we go. As I said before, roughly a cup. So here I am. I'm going to do some fine cross cutting. And you want these pieces to be roughly, 1/8 of an inch. If they're slightly wider, that won't hurt, but try to keep them not too large. We want little specks of green down in our dressing, not chunks. Oh man, that fresh, crisp, earthy scent that the celery has is so robust. By itself, I'm not terribly fond of celery. However, I have to say, in this recipe, it's delicious and it works well. The onion, next thing we need to do. Let's go ahead and get him cut up. Beautiful little onion, but I need to remove that outer layer. It's a bit papery in some spots, just like that. There we go. I'm going to give it a rinse. There we are. Much better. Now with this, I'm going to want fine dice. And let me show you a neat way to getting fine dice. And some things I want to mention about handling knives and your vegetables and everything. An onion's a perfect thing to learn how to cut with, because once you learn to cut one of these well, everything seems to get easy after that. Now, first of all, people that hold their vegetables like this are just aching to get their fingertips cut. So turn those fingertips under. Go from here to here. That way this knuckle right here, this joint, is vertical and the knife can slide along it nice and easy, and you don't cut your fingertips. On that knife, pinch the blade on the flat portion directly in front of the handle, then wrap your fingers around the remainder. What that does is it gives you a roll control on that knife. The knife doesn't want to roll as much like this, but it'll keep itself under control a little better. You got better control on it that way. On an onion, if you're going to be making really even-sized dice, let me show you how a professional does that. First thing I want to do, make sure I get my knife right here. I want to bring my knife up just a little bit, and what this does is this makes a cross cut in this side here, where it wraps down. See that? Isn't that simple? Now the next thing, we're going to make lengthwise cuts, just like this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my finger over here, but I'm not putting it in contact with the edge, just on that food and holding it in place as I slide the knife back, keeping it in contact with the board the whole time. So you see how small I'm cutting that. I'm cutting that right at 3/16 of an inch wide. That one was more like a quarter. That gets a little bit tricky. Right there, okay. At this point, I can turn that onion around, and I have these nice little straight pieces that I can cut into the most perfect dice. A couple pieces. Isn't that excellent? Now look at these. Look at the size of them and how even everything is. That is the advantage of that technique. It gives you a very even cut. Go ahead and that's about what I have there. Isn't quite a full cup, but if I cut up all of this, it's going to be closer to a cup and a half or a cup and a quarter. Bit more than I need. I won't use it all, but I will use what I need. There we go. I'm going to go a little bit more than a cup, about a cup and a quarter, cup and a half, because I like onion and I love red onion. Let me get that larger piece out of there. Okay guys, let's get ready to cook these up. Now let's go ahead and save back the drippings from that turkey. I don't want a lot of the solid material that's in this, so I'll have a strainer to catch it. You don't have to run it through a strainer. You get to if you have one, but you don't have to. All right guys, go ahead and get some eggs in some water and onto some heat. Now what we want to do is bring these up to a boil. As soon as this comes to a boil, I'm going to turn the heat off, cover it. I'm going to let them stand for 10 minutes, and then we're going to transfer these to some cold water, a bowl of cold water. At that point, the eggs will gently cool down, and after about 10 to 15 minutes that way, we're ready to peel them. Now we're going to need these hard-boiled eggs for both the giblet gravy as well as for our dressing. The giblets and neck have all cooked down nice and tender, and what I'm doing now is I'm simply separating these neck segments, the bones, from one another, and they should come apart easily if you've cooked this well enough. If not, keep cooking it a little longer. And what I'm doing is I'm just taking all that meat off of there. This is a very delicate, tender meat, but it's also extremely flavorful. That's one of the reasons that they leave that in with turkeys. It's not just a coincidence. This is all going to be down in the dressing mixture. If you would, just do yours the same way. Go ahead and shred out all the meat on that neck and just save it. If you've ever had the meat on a chicken wing, this is similar in texture. Very, very delicate and light, but it's a dark meat, so it gives you that robust flavor. Well, that ugly old turkey neck was good for something after all, wasn't it? Alright, I'm not going to go at it any further than that. I've done a good enough job, and there's my neck meat. Beautiful, a wonderful addition to this dish. Okay guys, we're going to do a little bit of pre-cooking on our celery and our onion. Get that butter in a pan and get it melting. And as soon as it melts, go ahead, put those vegetables in there and get them cooked over a medium-low heat until they turn nice and tender for you. Our butter is pretty much melted out, so I'm going to go ahead, get these veggies in there. We're going to let those cook, and right now I need to go ahead and take care of the cornbread. I've taken about 1/3, or excuse me, about 2/3 of the cornbread out of that pan, and I'm just putting it in here so I can crumble it up. And you don't want big old chunks like this, okay? You want some little pieces like this, and that's just perfect. If you over process this, like let's say you put it in a food processor and just turn it into a crumbled mess, you've really over processed it, and you're going to end up changing the texture of your dressing. Now, I personally like a dressing that has a little texture in it. I don't like one that has been cooked down like some sort of a pate or something, where it's basically just mushy. I don't really enjoy it like that. I like mine a little drier and a little more crumbled substance, something that I can bite into and taste and see texture in when I see it on my plate. And so that's what we have going on here. Take your biscuits and crumble them in the same way. Now these, we've got plenty of browning on them, on the bottoms of the biscuits, and that's just fantastic, because when you do that, when you get that kind of color in there, that adds flavor, and again, there's some structure, there's more substance to it. It's not just bland and boring. If I've upset anybody by saying I don't like mine to be kind of mushy and you like yours to be that way, well, I apologize, but guess what? We don't all like exactly the same things. That's the reason there's so many different recipes out there. If we all like the same thing, there would be very few recipes. All right, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? As soon as the rest of my my vegetables finish cooking up over here and get nice and tender, then we're going to get it all mixed together and start baking it. It's just a matter of getting these cooked down a little bit. And I want to cook them until the onions start to turn a little bit translucent. What I have here is a 9x13 glass baking pan. I'm going to be cooking up my dressing in this, but I don't really want it to stick a whole lot. So what I'm going to do to help prevent that sticking is I'm going to grease and flour it. Now I have here some lard. For this you can use lard, you can use all vegetable shortening, you can use butter, whatever you want. I added this because A, it adds a slightly pork bacony kind of element. And that's a good flavor to throw in there. So as you see, get it spread all over your pan. Whoops, I better be careful. There we go. After you have that spread on your pan, now watch this. There, I'm all cleaned up. Isn't that simple? Put your flour in and work that flour around it until it's coated all the way around. Isn't that easy? And that's what we call having a pan greased and floured. And now I just knock out the excess in the sink, and this is ready to go. There we have it, one pan greased and floured and ready to cook with. Right now I have this heavenly aroma that is just lifting through my home. The smell of this butter and these vegetables cooking, it's divine. Guys, we are nearing the end of this. It's very simple. I have this which has been cooking down and is looking lovely. I need to put my nuts in that. And I'm just going to bring them up in temperature just a little bit. We're going to let those soak up some of that butter. There we go. Look at that. Now, I'm ready to place this down in my mixture. We now have our cornbread and the biscuits here. Let's go ahead and put all of this right in there. all at once. Stir that in. I'm going to add in my meat. Going to add my eggs. A little bit of salt. A little bit more. I'm going to dust in some sage. How much of this ground sage do you use? I would say don't use more than a tablespoon, guys. Now you need the sage in there. It is part of the flavor of this. I'll dust it with it a little more. Stir that in once more. Just another hit of lightly with the salt. Another dusting with the sage. I certainly have not gone over my maximum amount, which is a tablespoon. The next thing I need to do, we need to get some liquid into this to hydrate it and turn it into the wonderful thing it can be. I'm going to start with that liquid that I boiled the neck and the giblets in. I'm just going to ladle out a little of that, about 2 ladles here. Go ahead and mix that in. As I'm mixing this, I want it to become thoroughly moist throughout, but I do not, and repeat, I do not want this mushy or completely saturated over. Now my turkey drippings. I'm going to mix that well so I can get some of the fat as well as some of the juices from underneath. Oops, looks like I flung a little bit of it out. It happens, you know, it just happens. Okay, I'm starting to get a nice moisture content. It's starting to stick together for me here. I'm going to be adding a little more. Oh, yes. Now I have a nice condition where everything is thoroughly moist. But again, it's not soupy. It's not mushy. There are plenty of chunks of everything in there. It's all quite visible. So that way my textures are on. Remember, I told you that texture is an important thing. Okay, right here at this point, I'm finished mixing. I just need to put it into my dish and we are up and running. My oven has been preheating. It's at 350 degrees. Put this down in my nice little dish here. That's just a matter of leveling this out, getting it nice and smooth and even, and then we're going to get it in that oven and bake it up. So I have a beautiful dressing here, a lot of color in it. Got that green, we got some purple going on in there, little white specks from the egg, some yellow specks from the egg. Wow. There we go. I'm just smoothing that out still. Isn't that beautiful? We're done. From here, it's a trip to the oven, 350 degrees for 45 minutes. Well, I've just pulled this from the oven. You can see it's still bubbling on the edges. That's normal. It should have a light springiness to it. Okay, see that? Perfect. It's beautiful. It's lightly browned on top. This one came out lovely. Now I can't wait to taste it. Oh man. Hey, there it is, guys. That's all there was. Nothing like a little holiday dressing. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? It's still moist, delicious, crumbly, just like I was wanting it. Magnificent. Oh man. This is one of the things I would always have extra. when Mom would do the turkey and dressing and giblet gravy, I would always have more dressing. It was always so good. This, fantastic. Good texture, popping flavors. I mean, just jump out and smack you kind of flavors. Really, really good. This is the kind of recipe that I want to get every time I get dressing. And so often I'm disappointed. It's usually some mushy, nasty compound. This is real, and it's good. Folks, thank you very much for watching Texas Cooking Today. And also, to my subscribers, I would like to say thank you very, very much. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please do. And guys, please share my videos. That'll help me grow my audience. You guys have a nice day, and goodbye. Hey guys, thank you for watching Texas Cooking Today. Do appreciate it. If you would, please subscribe. If you like this, just click like down there, and if you would, I would really appreciate it if you add me to your favorites. Thank you.